Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Xizhi. Coming up in this edition, France's borrowing costs have surpassed those of Greece for the first time, prompting questions about whether it is heading for a Greek-style debt crisis. Israel and Hezbollah have reported violence barely one day into a ceasefire. And at least 15 people are dead and more than 110 missing after a landslide in eastern Uganda. We begin in Europe. France's sovereign borrowing costs have surged above those of Greece for the first time. This comes as investors are still doubtful amid instability within the government. It adds to the pressure on Prime Minister Michel Barnier, whose austerity budget proposes to slash public spending and raise taxes. Ross Cullen explains how has borrowing become so high in France.
These borrowing costs, people really asking if France is the new Greece. You might remember back in 2008, 2009, the Eurozone's worst ever sovereign debt crisis centred on the state of Greek finances. And now the political uncertainty is causing investors to charge the same interest on holding French debt that they might be charging to hold Greek debt, something that we've never seen before. We have heard from the finance minister on this. Antoine Armand has been speaking, saying that France is not the new Greece, saying that France does have an economy, employment, activity, attractiveness and economic and demographic power, which is much greater than that of Athens. But there's certainly worries that the government, which believes it has the right medicine to deal with the French economy, a mix of spending cuts and tax rises worth more than $60 billion, worries that if the government can't get that through, that would spill into real market uncertainty. France is trying to adhere to EU fiscal rules. The government says the budget is needed to be able to get France's deficit down from around 6% to 5% next year. But in terms of Parliament, certainly are not willing to accept the government's budgetary recommendations. And let me just bring you up to speed with some of the things that have changed. So the government set out roughly $40 billion worth of spending cuts, $20 billion worth of tax rises, it says, are needed in 2025. Michel Barnier has ruled out his planned electricity tax. Marine Le Pen, the far-right figurehead, said we don't want that tax, and Michel Barnier has acceded to those demands. We have the French finance minister on record, Antoine Armand, saying that whatever differences in values we are today facing an extremely serious situation for the country. We are obviously ready to make concessions to avoid the storm. Just because we have nothing in common doesn't mean we should plunge the country into budgetary and financial uncertainty. Marine Le Pen, the far-right figurehead, and her party leader Jordan Bardella cock a hoop because they say we have managed to get the government to accept our demands. We are able to influence the government from opposition. Ms Le Pen saying that she will do whatever she needs to do to defend the French people. Some people think that could be bringing down the government next week.
That was Ross Cullen in Paris on the French government's sovereign debt woes. Elsewhere on the continent, Russia's attacks on energy infrastructure in Ukraine have left over 1 million people without power. Russian President Vladimir Putin says the move is in retaliation for Ukraine's firing of Western weapons. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky describes the Russian attacks as a despicable escalation. Li Qianhua reports.
The second big Russian attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure in less than a fortnight. Once again, residents in Kiev had to shelter in metro stations as missiles and drones targeted their city.
Our mornings begin with checking the phone to see if there's an air alert. I have to take the eldest daughter to school. We saw that there was an air alert and went to the metro. What do we think about all this? We are indeed fed up with all of it.
Ukraine's energy minister confirmed widespread attacks on energy facilities across the country, prompting energy power cuts. Explosions were heard in Ukrainian cities, including Odessa, Kharkiv and Rivne. In the west, Lviv, Volyn and Rivne experienced significant power outages. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the assault. He urged the Western allies to expedite air defense support and weapons deliveries. Ukraine recently fired US and UK missiles into Russian territory for the first time. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is attending a security meeting in Kazakhstan, called his country's latest strikes a retaliation.
Tonight we carried out a comprehensive strike using 90 missiles of this class and 100 drones. 17 targets were hit. These were military facilities, defence industry facilities and their support systems. I repeat, once again, these strikes from our side took place also in response to the incessant strikes on Russian territory by American missiles ATACMS. As been said many times, there will always be a response from our side.
This marks Russia's 11th large-scale assault on Ukraine's energy infrastructure this year, with the Russian ground forces in the east reportedly advancing at their fastest pace since the conflict began. Ukraine faces mounting challenges as the war enters its third winter.
That was Li Jianhua on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Turning to the Middle East, Israel's military says it has fired at what it calls suspects in Lebanon violating the ceasefire. Lebanese media say at least 2 people were injured. Meanwhile, Hezbollah claims that the Israeli forces are attacking people trying to return home. The incidents came just a day after an Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire deal took effect. Jonathan Regev tells us more from Tel Aviv.
Is the ceasefire holding? Yes, but there are incidents. And for the first time since the ceasefire came into effect, there's actually a strike from an Air Force jet in Lebanon as before. The aim is not to hit anybody, but to disperse people coming into areas where they cannot be. There are certain lines, according to the ceasefire deal, where people cannot be, where Lebanese cannot come in, at least until the Israeli army leaves. And as people are coming back to their villages. The Israeli army is trying to disperse them earlier in the day through tanks. Now we're hearing of this an Air Force jet striking in an area. And also Hezbollah is trying to perhaps see what the new rules are, if they can perhaps disguise themselves as civilians and bring back ammunition back closer into the border. Israel has said very clear, the Israeli army will prevent any violation from day one. That is why we're seeing shots being fired. That is why we're seeing jets firing in UAVs and so on. Israel wants to convey the message that every violation, small or large, will be dealt with right from the beginning.
That was Jonathan Regev on the volatile situation along the border between Israel and Lebanon. In Africa, rescue efforts are underway in eastern Uganda to retrieve bodies after a rain-triggered landslide hit 6 villages along the slopes of Mount Elgon. The Uganda Red Cross says at least 15 bodies are being recovered, while over 110 people are still missing. Leon Sinyagi reports.
The heavy rains left a trail of devastation in Bulambuli district in eastern Uganda. Rescuers say at least 40 houses were completely buried, with others sustaining partial damage. While some bodies have been recovered, there are fears that many more are still buried under the rubble.
We continue to support the families that have been affected, of course, together with the emergency medical services. 15 people have been referred for further medical assistance after we offered first aid, and we continue to work with the local leadership to come together with to come up with a rapid assessment report.
Last month, more than 400 people were left homeless in the same district due to landslides triggered by heavy rain. Such natural disasters have become common in the mountainous area bordering Kenya. Authorities have warned of fresh cracks that have formed in the landslide-prone region along Mountain Elgon slopes. Uganda is currently experiencing above normal rains, which could continue until the end of the year.
That was Leon Sinyagi reporting. In Asia, the China-Southeast Asia Marine Cooperation Forum has highlighted the urgent need for collaboration to protect marine ecosystems. They are not only vital for Asia-Pacific's economy, but also serve as a lifeline for millions who depend on the ocean for their livelihoods. These waters are facing mounting challenges from climate change to pollution. Sukina Alwali has more from Jakarta.
Southeast Asia and China are home to some of the world's most diverse marine environments. The regions rely heavily on their oceans for key sectors like fisheries, tourism, and even agriculture. However, extreme weather events and marine pollution are just a few of the challenges these nations are facing. This is where the China-Southeast Asia Marine Cooperation Forum comes in, and this year marks the re-establishment of the Indonesia-China Center for Ocean and Climate.
ICCOC should be an open platform to strengthen collaborations with our local universities, relevant ministries, and also agencies and other stakeholders in Indonesia and also surrounding countries. Such collective work is very, very essential, particularly for accelerating our contribution to the UN Decade of Ocean Science.
During President Prabowo's recent visit to Beijing, the two nations also signed a major deal to develop marine resources. This agreement covers a range of areas, including renewable coastal energy, seafood processing, and improving ports. China and Indonesia's partnership marks an important step in unlocking Indonesia's marine and coastal potential. It's a shared effort to promote sustainable growth while creating jobs and protecting the environment. China and ASEAN aims to create a future where the ocean is a source of economic strength as well as a symbol of regional cooperation.
So for the renewable energy and the blue economy is very important for the world. And China pay high attention on these two fields. We need some joint action. So not only based on understanding. Understanding is very important for scientists, but for the sustainable development, for the public, is not enough. We need to work together to how to use the renewable energy and through the advanced knowledge and technology.
As the forum concludes, the vision is clear that science dialogue and partnership will turn shared challenges into shared progress for the region's oceans.
That was Sukina Alwalia on China and Southeast Asian countries exploring ways to preserve the marine ecosystem. Now recapping the headlines. The political instability in France has widened and driven borrowing costs higher than that of Greece for the first time. Some alleged attacks have flared up during an Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire, with both sides accusing each other of violations. And rescuers in eastern Uganda are searching for more than 110 people after a landslide that killed more than 15. That's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Siju. Thank you for listening.